The history of Scandinavia and its people is written in the sea. Their names might be Einar, Knut, or Harald, names that seem to spring from Norse mythology. Their ancestors had names like Eric the Red and Leif the Lucky. The defiant prows of Viking boats are their link to the past and the present. The modern Viking is still on the sea. 10 centuries ago, their fierce ancestors rode the oceans as pirates and plunderers. Today's Norsemen are still defying the threat of the open sea and meeting its challenges. They come to harvest its riches and perhaps to satisfy some ongoing spirit of adventure and excitement. Above the Arctic Circle along Norway's northwest coast lie the Lofoten Islands. With mountains still unscarred by industry and waterways free of modern commerce, the Lofotens are a vision of what northern Scandinavia's seacoast once was like. In the beginning, the people clinging to the northern coasts and fjords were primitive and isolated fishing tribes. Some have always remained peaceful and contented fishermen. Here in late winter, the waters are thick with spawning cod. Since the Stone Age, men have clustered along the rugged shores and looked to the sea for survival. From the beginning, fishing has been the basis of their life. On these northern islands, the brief summer is not a holiday, but a time to repair the scars of an Arctic winter. And it is a time to prepare the winter catch for shipment to nearby Sweden and as far away as Nigeria. Through the endless days of the midnight sun, the cod continues to dry until all the moisture is For hundreds of years, the cod has been prepared this way. Once it would have been carried to Spain and Italy in wooden sailing ships. Out of such fjords and harbors, shrouded by mist and mountains, out of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, came the great seafarers of the north, the men the world remembers as the Vikings. By the 8th century, people of the north had become masters of the sea, and it was their gateway to the world. Unknown generations ago, the Viking ship evolved, shaped by artisans who passed their skills from sun to sun. Without blueprint, with eye and memory as their only reference, they still build boats with unmistakable Viking lines. To the Vikings and their descendants, a boat has always been a work of art, an expression of its creator, a piece of sculpture. The present-day boat builder still follows the same design, used to reconstruct a 1,000-year-old relic. The ship they reassemble was sunk by Vikings to protect the Danish town of Roskilde from enemy fleets. Scandinavian archaeologists and historians are not only rebuilding ancient structures, they are piecing together a true picture of the way their Norse ancestors lived. Constructed along the lines of a ship, a reproduced barracks at Trelleborg, Denmark, stands by the site of a massive Viking fortress. Ringed by an earthen rampart 55 feet thick, the military encampment was built about the year 1000. Inside the boat-shaped barracks, 1,200 Viking warriors honed their spears, mended shields, and prepared a well-planned invasion of England. To recapture their Viking heritage, a group of Danes built an authentic Viking ship, using Viking tools and traditional designs. And so across the North Sea their ancestors came, terrorizing the known world for 2.5 centuries. Triggered by a population explosion and internal strife, men of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark swarmed out of Scandinavia in quest of land and wealth. In their language, Viking meant piracy and plunder, and they became the Vikings. From the British Isles to Russia, Europe prayed, "From the fury of the Northmen, deliver us, O Lord." Across the northern seas, they pushed westward to Iceland and Greenland, the world's largest island, colonized by Eric the Red. They sailed across thousands of miles of unknown seas and oceans. They founded settlements in Ireland and France. They established trade from Morocco to Byzantium. And before the 10th century ended, Leif the Lucky had stepped ashore in North America. The Vikings were the first European colonists in America. Early in the 11th century, they built a settlement in the new land they called Vinland and remained 3 years. For centuries, historians have speculated about Vinland. But in 1962, a Norwegian scholar unearthed Viking ruins on the northern tip of Newfoundland. Throughout their age of conquest, they were obsessed warriors. They believed they earned their place in paradise by a glorious death in battle. It was a celebration when a dead Viking chief was burned with his ship and sent to Valhalla. Perhaps it was the coming of Christianity which destroyed their passion for battle and death. By the middle of the 11th century, their power had waned. The age of the Vikings was over. On the southern coast of Sweden, the Vikings left their own memorial to the glorious age. Beneath massive tombstones shaped like ships lie the remains of once feared Norsemen. Their gravestones are a monument to the civilization which perished here long centuries ago. Since the end of the Viking Age in 1066, the beaches of Scandinavia have never again been the launching sites for invasions of distant lands. Like the Vikings' earliest ancestors, many of their descendants have turned again to the sea in peace. Time and technology have wrought their changes, but men of southern Sweden are still fishermen. Throughout the weeks of summer, they work to erect a forest of timbers to support their almost endless nets. All this in preparation for the great migration of the eels. After a few brief weeks of summer, the coast is left to the fishermen and their nets. Stretched hundreds of feet out into the Baltic Sea, The finely meshed nets become barriers to block the eel's passageway and to drive them into smaller capture nets. In early autumn, the Baltic comes alive. Unseen in the turbulent water, millions of eels are a living current winding toward the North Sea and on into the Atlantic. The Swedish fishermen depend on one of nature's greatest mysteries. Now is the time when eels migrate from all over northern Europe to their spawning grounds in the Sargasso Sea near the island of Bermuda. On a day such as this, with a strong wind off the Baltic, the eels are driven into shore and into the maze of nets. Despite their heritage of the sea, their skill and planning, they still depend on a fisherman's luck. A day's catch may be anything from a single eel to 10,000 pounds. Eels caught in large numbers often suffer shock and die if left too long in the boat. They are rushed to floating chests. Here they are kept alive in their own environment until the buyer's boat arrives. Like farmers of the sea, they have sole rights to the stretch of fishing lots bounded by their nets. The eels trapped in their waters are theirs alone, their yearly harvest. They still lay claim to the sea. Since Europe's dark ages, Norse seamen have hunted the great whales. From open boats, they challenged the largest animal on Earth. The romantic days when hunter and hunted were evenly matched are long gone, and this memorial marks their passing. To the people of Sandefjord, this statue is a reminder. Their town was once the nerve center of Norwegian whaling activities in the Antarctic. At that time, almost everyone in Sandefjord was involved with whaling in one way or another. Captain Nils Larsen first went to sea and down to the Antarctic in 1915. He commanded a whaling vessel for 11 years until retiring in 1966.
I miss the whaling very much. We used to go down to the Antarctic during the winter time, and in summertime we spent here in Sandefjord. And now I'm just taking care of the house and garden and help my wife. Washing dishes, go shopping. There is nothing else to do.
Once a week, Larsen and other whalers gather at their club. Captains, mates, harpooners. Men who sailed together from Norway to the Antarctic.
She has only one... How many men do you have on deck at that time?
From deck boy to captain, Nils Larsen remained at sea for over a half a century. His glory days are over. Little is left but memories. Modern whaling began with the invention of an explosive head harpoon by a Norwegian in the 1860s. In 1904, the first land-based whaling station was established by Norway on South Georgia Island. Other nations soon followed. Throughout the Antarctic summer, whales were brought in and processed. Finback up to 80 feet long, right whale, a massive baleen, and oil for lamps, candles, and soap. And there was the blue whale, the largest animal ever to live in the sea or on the land. Sandefjord was where Norway's Antarctic whaling expeditions began and ended.
During the period of whaling, Sandefjord was a very, very busy place towards the end of the summer.
Nils Olsson managed a whaling station for 10 years.
And in this area, the factory ships were tied up for repairs and fitting out for the next season. We had ships alongside the jetty here, over on the other side, and 5 or 6 factory ships further inside the bay. A couple of thousand men were occupied fitting out these ships, and there was great traffic on the waters with launches, ferries, and all kinds of small craft. We had people coming from the areas around town to go on board with their gear. There were supplies to go on board, and there was a tremendous activity through the whole summer.
The voyage they were about to undertake would be different from all the others. In 1965, this was to be one of the last Norwegian whaling armadas to sail to the Antarctic. They would be gone for half a year. The trip south would take a month. A 10,000-mile journey from the top of the world to the bottom. Midway under the equatorial sun, there would still be some time for relaxation. These southern seas had been dominated not long ago by Norwegian whaling fleets. At times, as many as 12 factory vessels, each accompanied by 10 to 15 smaller boats, hunted the Antarctic waters. Now, a lone factory ship and a small escort of whale catchers approached the ice for one final kill. Once a whale was sighted, the harpooner directed the chase. Dead whales weighing as much as 100 tons were hauled in by the ship's powerful winch. The animal was pumped full of air to keep it from sinking and marked for the buoy boat, which would tow them to the factory ship. Hunting in the Antarctic continued unabated until the 1930s, when Norway set the first restrictions on killing whales. This was the initial step that led after World War II to the establishment of international limits. For the first time in decades, gunners were no longer on their own. Operations were directed by the factory ship's manager, who aimed the hunting ships to their target areas each day. On the smaller hunting ships, the quarry had to be transferred to the factory. There the whales would be flensed, stripped of blubber, and processed. A season's catch was expected to yield up to 100,000 barrels of oil. Few men know Antarctic whaling, like Niels Olsen.
The top deck was the fencing deck. Here the whales were taken up in one piece, up by the slipway. The whale could weigh 70 to 100 tons, and we could have 4 or 5 whales up on the deck being flensed for blubber and cut to pieces and fed into big holes in the deck into the steam cookers. We had tanks, oil tanks, in the hull of the ship. We had a tank deck combined as a factory deck with a lot of processing machinery. Whaling went on all around the clock, and it was hard work, but they worked up a very efficient routine, and they could disintegrate 20 whales in a shift, a 12-hour period.
Norwegians, Dutch, British, then Japanese and Russians. Over the years they slaughtered Antarctic whales, often as many as 40,000 a season. Entire species nearly vanished. As the whales began to disappear, men like Niels Olsen became concerned.
We were aware of that whaling could not go on. We were certainly overfishing. However, the catch was strictly limited by international agreement, so we went on until it was too great an economical risk to put out an expedition.
The great whaling fleets are gone from Sandefjord. The factory ships, the whale catchers, their captains and crews are but cherished memories for a city that had grown and prospered on whaling. Today, Sandefjord is home to new industries and to tankers and cargo ships that travel the world. What of whaling? Will it ever return?
I do not think the whaling will come back again. In our time, maybe after 50 years or so, there would be whales enough to start industrial whaling. However, I think whales should be protected now for a very long time.